Hello and welcome to your Urban Connection. Remember, this is the channel that is often imitated, but is never duplicated. Now, before I begin this program, I have a question for the viewing audience. Has anybody seen or heard from Tim Scott? Senator Tim Scott. Because I have not seen nor heard from Tim Scott since the RNC convention. Now, prior to that convention, Tim Scott was all over the television telling everybody that racism was over because he was going to be the first Black president on the Republican ticket. He assured you that Donald Trump was serious about selecting him as his vice president. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't like to say I told you so, but for the last year, maybe year and a half, I've been trying to tell Tim Scott that he would never be a vice president under a Donald Trump presidency. It wasn't going to happen, okay? And for the reasons that are obvious that I've stated many times before. So anyhow, I just wonder, has anybody seen or heard from Tim Scott? Tim Scott made a fool of himself, made a fool of the woman that he picked to say she was his girlfriend, okay? And then get engaged to her, all in an effort to make himself presentable and look like a presidential candidate to the Republican Party. And then, in the final analysis, after he was teased, used, and abused, Donald Trump picks a fool who, as opposed to Tim Scott, who was licking the boots of Donald Trump, this guy, J.D. Vance, was telling the whole world that he was a never Trumper. He couldn't stand Trump. Trump was America's version of Hitler and everything else you could say to denigrate Donald Trump. So, Tim, all that boot licking you did and saying, I love you, Mr. President, and all that didn't get you anywhere near the vice presidency. He picked somebody just the opposite of you. Somebody that didn't make him feel good, did not lick his boots, basically denigrated him the way he denigrated you, and that's what he picked. Tim, I tried to tell you, buddy, you ain't gonna get it. But anyhow, okay, I got a good story for you tonight, and I want to tell you about if you thought that the RNC convention was a clown show, you were right. But it was more than that. The RNC was a three-ring circus. You had Amber Rose, okay, you had J.D. Vance, you had Tim Scott, you had Nikki Haley, and then you had Donald Trump. But today, those of you that watched the NABJ program at their convention in Chicago featuring Donald J. Trump, you saw a different kind of a clown show because that was a one-man clown show. And the clown was Donald J. Trump, as usual. Yeah, here's the problem. For those of you that don't know what NAJB stands for, it's National Association of Black Journalists. Okay? And they had their convention in Chicago, and they invited as their guest Donald J. Trump. And what did Donald J. Trump do? He does what Donald J. Trump always does. Now, here's the problem with this. The NABJ was not prepared. And I don't know why not. I simply cannot tell you for the life of me. After having been exposed to Donald J. Trump for the last 8 years, and his antics and his racism and his disrespect and his degrading that he shows for Black women and women broadcasters in particular, why in the heck they would subject 3 experienced professional Black broadcasters to sit on a stage with Donald Trump to interview him without having control of his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody should have learned by now that if you don't have control of Donald Trump's microphone, regardless of what your show is, regardless of what network it's with, regardless of what organization it's with, it's going to turn into the Donald Trump show. And that's what happened today. You see, they put 3 women up there. Now, my first question is, why is it that you would put anybody on the stage with Donald J. Trump and not have control of his mic? In other words, you've got to have the ability to shut his mic off when he gets started going off script. He doesn't have a teleprompter, but he goes way off, and you ask him a question, and it's a yes or no question, and it takes him 5 to 10 minutes to answer the question, and he still doesn't answer it. And if he does it, if it's 5 minutes, 4 minutes and 55 seconds of it is talking about something that has nothing to do with the question that you originally were asked. That's typical Donald Trump. So this is why I'm saying that they did not have control of the program from the minute they went on the air. Okay, and let me give an example. The minute they went on the air, the professional reporter from ABC, whose name is Scott, Rachel, I'm not sure of her first name, but Scott, asked him a question. And he didn't like the question, and it was an appropriate question. It was a fair question. She asked him why it is that he was so disrespectful, so rude, and so degrading of other professional broadcast females, such as Abby Phillips from CNN, April Ryan, who used to be with CNN, and Denise Alcindor, okay, who now I think is with the Washington Post and MSNBC, among others, that he constantly degraded and said that they were rude, they were dumb, they were unprofessional, whatever. Asked him, why did he do that? Well, he didn't like the question, so he lashed into her right off the bat. Very first question. He never answered the question, by the way, but he spent 5 minutes telling her how rude she was, how ignorant she was unprofessional, she was from ABC, and ABC is worthless, blah, 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 and blah, blah, and he went on and on and on, and it didn't get any better from there. Now, so my second question is, in addition to not having control of his microphone, why would the National Association of Black Journalists send 3 Black females up there and subject them, and they had to know, subject them to all kinds of disrespect, to be disgraced, to be embarrassed, okay, and to be called everything, and not have any men interviewing him? See, he doesn't treat men the same way, but he has a disdain for women, and in particular, Black female journalists. Now, so as the program progressed, it was supposed to be a 1-hour show. Now, according to Mr. Trump, the show was about 20 to 30 minutes late going on the air. And it was, according to him, it was caused by faulty equipment, or they couldn't get the equipment working properly, whatever. So he spent a good portion of the show lambasting them for being 34 minutes late, not having proper working equipment, bad microphones. He said 2 or 3 times that he couldn't hear, okay? He could not hear the questions from Harris Faulkner, who is a black female from Fox News. And you know what Fox News is? Fox News is nothing but a propaganda arm of the Republican Party and of Donald Trump. Okay? Now, he had nice things to say about Harris Faulkner. Okay? He didn't say one word of disrespect or disgrace to Harris Faulkner. But to the other two, I mean, it was a, like I said, it turned into the Donald Trump show. And Donald Trump was at his best being a clown, being a fool, being a racist, being disrespectful, and denigrating everybody he could think of that had a D beside their name. Or he languished out some ridicule for Kamala Harris, saying that Kamala was not black until just a couple of years ago. He always saw her and he said she represented herself as an Indian. Now, this is mindful of the fact that she went to an HBCU, Howard University. That's where she graduated from. She was a member of a African American sorority. Okay? She's always, ever since I've ever known, I first heard of her, identified as being black. But Donald Trump has to say something to degrade her, to disrespect her, and try to bring her down a notch. Because you see, the real thing is, truth be told, Donald Trump doesn't want any part of Kamala Harris. She's an established prosecutor, has been a district attorney for the largest state in the country. She's been elected to 3 or 4 different positions. And yet, he wants to say she didn't pass the bar exam. So how do you get there to being elected to district attorney of the largest state in the country? Okay? And how do you get to be elected to the United States Senate? And how do you get to be appointed to vice president if you're dumb and ignorant? Okay? You see, Donald Trump, during his tenure as president, attempted to appoint members to the courts, the district courts around the country, that did not pass the bar exam, were not attorneys. He tried to make them judges. And if it were not for an alert, and astute Congress, he would have gotten away with it. You see, so it doesn't make any difference about what your credentials are if you're white, as far as Donald Trump is concerned. But if you're black, oh no, you can't slide by. You can't get by. You see, you've got to be 3 times as good just to get your foot in the door. And it's very unlikely that if you're black or brown, you're going to get both feet in the door with Donald Trump. Okay? Now, so the whole thing, this thing was supposed to last for 1 hour. And during the 34 minutes that the show was actually on the air, Donald Trump was asked one question after another by these 3 female journalists. And I can tell you, as of right now, Donald Trump has not answered a single one of those questions. He's blabbered, he's flabbered, he's danced around, he's finagled, he's did everything. He's lied, talked about what he's done that he has not done, talked about what Kamala has not done that she has done, talked about Joe Biden, and Joe Biden he's not running against Joe Biden anymore, any of that. But he did everything he could do to dance around the question. And this is typical Donald Trump. And this is why I say that you have to be able to control his mic because he will go off into his own narrative. And you ask him a question, and he will talk for 15 minutes if you don't control his mic, and he never answers the question. And these females, they work for ABC, Fox, and I'm not sure where the other worked, but they work for somebody. They have a boss. They can't be disrespectful back. They have to sit there and take it. And they can be fuming inside. Their blood could be boiling with anger. They've got to sit there with a smile on their face and be professional, or they risk losing their jobs. And that's what they did. I give them credit. They were much more calm than I would have ever been. But you see, I would have stopped Donald Trump within the first 30 seconds if he was not answering the question that I had asked him. And said, Mr. Trump, I'm sorry, sir, but this is an interview that's hosted by the National Association of Black Journalists, and I have been appointed to ask you questions, and I expect you to answer the questions. I didn't ask you for a sermon, okay? I asked you a question, and it was a yes or no question, and I want to take you back to the question. And if you cannot answer the question, I'm going to cut your mic off, sir. It's as simple as that. And that's what you have to do with Donald Trump. Because look, Donald Trump gets his jollies being on television and controlling the narrative. And here's the thing. Donald Trump, for the last 10 days, has not been able to be on television controlling the narrative. See, Kamala Harris has been doing that for the last 10 days. All of the momentum, all of the enthusiasm, all of the favoritism has been in favor of Kamala Harris. Donald Trump has to take a back seat, and he can't stand that. You see, he can't stand, first of all, not being the center of attention each and every day. And he certainly can't understand. And he certainly can't deal with being in the back seat watching while this black woman, okay, who he despises, but he doesn't know how to handle, is taking all of the fun out of his game. Because she's the one now that's getting all the airtime. She's the one that's getting all of the attention. She's the one, everything is focused on her and around her. And he can't stand it. See, he can't stand it. He's not been himself since the very day that Joe Biden said, I am going to drop out as candidate for president, and I'm going to endorse my vice president, Kamala Harris. Donald Trump has not been the same since. And who can blame him? Because he made a fool of himself by picking a guy who is more ignorant than he is, J.D. Vance. And so now they've spent the last 10 days trying to clean up the things that Vance has said about childless people, people who don't have kids, and other foolish things. And they're cleaning that up. And now Trump is embarrassed because he let his sons, who like father, like son, are both fools, let them coerce him into picking J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance didn't bring anything positive to the table for him. And J.D. Vance has the nerve, and the audacity to say that Kamala Harris is a DEI hire. Okay? Yeah. To show you how big of a fool he is, he's a DIR. He's a dumb, ignorant racist. And he doesn't understand how racist his party is. So I'm going to give you a little example. After his wife was brought on stage at the RNC convention, J.D. Vance got all kinds of flack and backlash from members of his own party, the MAGA party, about who he married. Because his wife is a Hindu Indian. And they can't stand that. They don't like that. And they begin to turn on J.D. Vance. And they've been trying to get J.D. Vance, some of them, off that ticket ever since. You see? So J.D. Vance didn't recognize that the people that he was surrounding himself with and had surrounded himself with, he didn't realize how racist they were until he brought his wife on stage for the whole world to see. And the MAGA people didn't like what they saw. And they questioned, how could he marry someone who's not a Christian? How could he marry someone with an Indian heritage? Welcome to the MAGA party, Mr. Vance. Now, this is what was shown today by Mr. Trump as he virtually took over the show on full display for the whole 34 minutes that he was on the air with these three Black women. He spewed, voiced, and disrespectfully showed just how racist he really is. And he showed that racism toward not only those three Black women hosts, but as toward the NABJ organization. He castigated them. He denigrated them. He talked about how unprepared, how inefficient they were. He talked about how unprepared they were in a very disrespectful way. No candidate that has an ounce of professionalism, that has an ounce of integrity, that has an ounce of credibility, that has an ounce of respect for himself, would conduct himself in the manner in which we saw Donald Trump do today for a full 34 minutes. Now, there probably are people, some of his MAGA followers, that thought he was throwing red meat. And it sounded good to them that he was being himself. After all, that's what attracted them to him in the first place. His racism, his hatred for women, his hatred for anybody that was not white. Blacks, browns, Muslims, Jewish people, women. He's full of hatred. He's full of racism. He's full of disrespect. He's full of disgrace. He's full of hatred. And it all showed up today in 34 minutes. So I say this. The NABJ was not prepared for what they got. And it showed. Now, all you have to do really is look at two things. In 2015, Donald Trump refused to appear at the NABJ Convention. In 2020, Donald Trump refused to appear at the same convention. But this year, Mr. Trump wants you Black folks to believe that he has love in his heart for you. But what he doesn't tell you is only if you vote for him. If you won't vote for him, he has no use whatsoever for you. Never has and never will. His daddy was a leader in the KKK. He and his daddy were sued by the federal government not once but twice for failing to rent apartments in New York City to Black people. Okay? Donald J. Trump put out full-page newspapers in the New York Times calling for the death penalty for 5 Black and brown youngsters who were falsely charged with the rape of a white woman. They were falsely charged. They were found not guilty. And even in view of that, Mr. Trump continued to ask for them to receive the death penalty after they had been vindicated. We've seen Mr. Trump during his presidency denigrate, disrespect Black politicians such as Mrs. Waters, such as the congressman from Florida, Mrs. Frederica Wilson, such as the one woman that you would never thought he would have turned on, Omarosa Medical. Now, Omarosa wrote what she called a tell-all book. But I'll tell you something. I'm not convinced that she told it all. But I'm hoping that at some future date, she will write another book and tell it all, including what she left out of the first book. Because I'm convinced there's more to this story than we've been told. Okay? So anyhow, folks, I'm just telling you, my show is, I want to say this. Don't be duped. Don't be fooled. Don't be bamboozled. Don't be conned by one of the greatest con men we've ever seen into thinking that Donald Trump has any love, any disrespect, any kind of genuine feelings for you if you're Black or brown. It's all a part of his game. And his game is and has been to get you to vote for him. He receives the benefit, and you will get kicked in the teeth once he's in office. Project 2025, if you don't know about it, you need to find out about it. Because there's an awful lot of things in there that are not meant for your benefit. Rather, they're meant for your demise. Okay? All right, folks, that's my show. And we'll see you next time. And thank you for watching.
History, and his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, let's keep going, and maybe something happens the other way.